welcome back to my channel. In today's video, what I'm going to be talking about is, can you ever really find yourself, with the subtitle of Reflections of a Girl Who's Still Trying to Figure Out Her Identity. So yeah, that's the topic for today, but I thought I would first properly welcome you. Welcome to my channel. This video series is called Personal Ramblings. Personal Ramblings is a blog that I have on Substack, but I also make video versions so I can talk a bit more about my thoughts. And this is meant to be a more laid back, chatty version. So I might be a bit more long-winded in my points or less formal, but I'm just hoping it can be a space where I can share more about how I'm thinking and feeling about different topics that I think about every day, I guess, because I post daily. And sorry for the worst video quality. I'm filming at night today because I was busy in the actual day, so I don't have the natural sunlight. I just have one overhead light. And I'm also going to try to keep my hand away from the microphone. I got comments about that, but I like having a bit of a chatty, laid back introduction and not getting straight into it because it feels more personal and it makes it a bit different to what I'm writing. Otherwise I'm just like not transcribing, the opposite of transcribing. Anyway, so today I'm going to be talking about the topic of finding yourself, discovering yourself, learning more about yourself. So I wasn't inspired by it at first, but as I was writing, I got reminded of the Disney movie Soul. And there's a part in Soul, the ending, where they ask the main character, Joe Gardner, how are you going to spend your life? And then he says, I'm not sure, but I do know I'm going to live every minute of it. So if you haven't watched Soul, don't worry. I'm going to give more context later on. But for now, I'm just going to dive straight into my journey of trying to find myself and my identity and whether I believe you can actually ever find yourself. So I've always loved teen dramas, Gossip Girl, Pretty Little Liars, Vampire Diaries, the whole lot of them. The fiery romances, big friendship battles, and the crazy scandals would keep me entertained for hours when I was a kid. More of a preteen than a kid, but I just said a kid for special effects. And I would always wonder, like, when I'm 16, am I going to go through all of this? When I'm 16, am I going to have crazy scandals and crazy friends and whatever? Well, I've been 16, it's gone and passed, and none of that actually happened. Thank goodness, actually. I think it would be a nightmare if any of those things ever actually happened to me, but they didn't. I had one friendship falling out and one teacher got arrested. But otherwise, secondary school was really, really boring. Nothing really happened. It's just a memory now. But I also remember when I would watch TV, there was another trope, and the person who comes to my mind specifically is Serena van der Woodsen from Gossip Girl, played by Blake Lively. And there's a part where she's talking to her mum, I think, about not going to college because she just needs to find herself. And her mum's like, what do you mean find yourself? And you know what? When I was young, I was on her mum's side because I'd be like, what do you mean you don't know who you are? Like, are you having identity issues? What does that mean? Because I thought at my young preteen age that I had it all figured out. I knew everything about myself and I didn't need to learn anything else. I was like, I'm 13 years old, I like to read books and I love music and I go to church on Sundays. And I thought that's all I needed to know. I had it all figured out. And I also knew that I didn't really enjoy church that much aside from the music. I also had a pretty stable group of friends that I really loved. And I was like, what more do I need to know about myself to supposedly find myself? But now I'm 23. Sorry, I had to cut for a bit, but I'm back. So I was talking about the fact that I am 23 now and I have no idea who I am. I'm now in the same situation that I used to judge those protagonists for being in, which is great. What goes around comes around, I guess. So yeah, I'd say I have a sense of my identity. I know the things that I'm comfortable or uncomfortable with. I'd say I have my own personal sense of style. I still have a pretty stable group of friends, but you know, who actually am I? I think that's the question I was asking. And I've only known myself as I relate to the people around me, whether that be family or friends. But sometimes I wonder if I was alone and completely independent, who would I really choose to be? And I think that's what those protagonists were getting at when they were 16 and flying across the world instead of going to, 18 and flying across the world instead of going to college or university or whatever. So I'd say that finding yourself is a pretty abstract concept, or like who am I is a pretty abstract question. It can bring up the psychological questions of like, what is the self, or does the self really exist? And I'm not a psychologist. I studied neuroscience, but I'm not a psychologist. All the philosophical, more personal human behavior side of things is where I lack a lot of knowledge and is outside of my jurisdiction. But whilst I'm not skilled in psychology, I am a human being and I do have thoughts. So I feel like I have some sort of sense of what the self could be. And I'd like to think that when I say self, I'm talking about my inner being. So that's the interaction of my conscience, my memories, and my current experiences that are shaping those two things. And myself is made up of the things I like and dislike, but more importantly, the why behind I like and dislike those things, but also my reasonings, judgments, and beliefs, and how I came to hold those beliefs. I feel like that's what makes up myself. And the why and the how are the interesting parts, because these are things that mostly come from outside of you, but you have now internalized to shape yourself, if it's a choice. But that's a different question. And it just got me thinking, like, if I hadn't grown up in the UK, or if I wasn't brought up in religion, I would be radically different. All of my reasonings, judgments, and my reasons for holding them, especially because they wouldn't have been shaped by my environment, culture, or religion, I would be basically an unrecognizable person to who I am today. And that's pretty crazy, because it makes me wonder, does myself really exist from like being born internally, or am I just a culmination of everybody who is around me and everything that has happened to me, rather than coming from myself? So yeah, back to the movie Soul. So the movie follows a man, Joe Gardner. This is going to be a very stripped back and like a very bare bones recap of the movie, because I know there's all the stuff about 22 and the other worlds and blah blah blah. But yeah, it's a movie that mainly follows a man, Joe Gardner, and he believes his sole purpose in life is to be a jazz musician, to play jazz. He loves it. And you could say the way he talks about it in the movie, you'd think that he has found himself. This is his sole purpose in life, and this is who he is. His entire identity is in the piano and jazz. And there comes a point in the movie where he achieves this dream. He plays for this super famous jazz musician and vocalist, Dorothea Williams. And it's like he's achieved this dream and he plays the jazz night in the jazz club. And then at the end, he turns to Dorothea and he asks, "What happens next?" And then Dorothea replies to him, "We come back tomorrow night and do it all again." And then following this, Joe reflects, "I thought I'd feel differently." And I feel like that's such an important part of the movie, because technically Joe has achieved everything he has ever believed in for himself. Like he should be self-actualized right now. He should be over the moon, like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and it's going to sustain me. But instead, he feels a little bit empty. Like, I've achieved it. What's next? Like, is this it? Is this all there is to my dream, to my purpose? I thought I'd found myself. And it's like, maybe like this dream, this purpose isn't what life is about. And maybe like what we believe is our purpose is not what's meant to sustain us until we inevitably die. So when I consider finding myself these days, and I'm trying to see who I am outside of the people around me, wanting to understand the decisions or choices I would make outside of the expectations of my parents, what choice I would make if I didn't fear judgment from my peers or even from God in a religious sense. Like, what kind of person would I actually be? And like, what would I think my purpose is on this earth? And I'll be honest, I don't think I really know, because it's impossible for me to exist outside of this, because we are humans, we are social, we are always we are always concerned of other people for the most part. And then it's like, what decisions would I make if I absolutely didn't care what anyone around me thought? I feel like a big part of discovering yourself is asking this question, because it makes you decenter the people around you and center yourself actually. And I still think it's complicated, because even if you decenter everyone else and center yourself, at the end of the day, the decision you're making from yourself, because you've been alive and interacting with people, it is still influenced by what the people who surrounded you have believed and taught you. So yeah, this whole thing kind of boggles my mind. And I came to a conclusion, this is such an academic conclusion, but I'm not sure. I don't have the answers. I don't know if we ever really find ourselves, but I do think that we learn more about ourselves every single day. And I also believe that we are continuously becoming ourselves. So it's not that we go on endless adventures to try and find our soul purpose, or we know that purpose and we go out to achieve it. Those are still good things to do, but rather our purpose is just to be alive and continue to shift and change as our situations and environment changes. And whoever we become in that moment is who we are. That is our true self. And like, who I am today is different to who I was yesterday, and it's going to be different to who I am in the future. A common thing that I hear a lot of married couples talk about is the person who you marry on your wedding day is different to who you grow old with, or something around that, if they're still together. And it's like, it's the sentiment that when you enter a union that is meant to be for a lifetime, you need to remember that we are always changing throughout our lifetime. I feel like that's the message they're trying to get across. So you may marry someone for who they are in that moment, or who you've met them as, but 10 years down the line, they could shift and become a different person. Why? Because situations change. People change as time continues to move. And it's like, as they continue to change, will you still be able to love them? Will you still be able to say for better or for worse? Because they won't be the same person that you married, even though they're within the same body, same mind, same name. And some people do, but others do have to let go. And I don't think it's anyone's fault in particular, or one is completely right or wrong. But I do think that's what it means to be alive, and especially alive with other people, because life is change. Life is constantly changing, and we are alive, so we will continue to change. So who I am right now is different to who I was when I was 13, and when I'm 33, I'll be completely different again. Like, if you told me when I was 13 that I was going to study neuroscience, you couldn't have paid me to do it. And then if you told me I was going to have a master's of science, I wouldn't believe you. I thought I was going to be an artist all the way, but I got a D in art. So that was never going to happen. But yeah, as I continue to grow and be patient with myself, I find a new self each time, because I'm alive, and to be alive is to change. And that's sort of the gist of where I am right now, about what it means to find yourself, to be yourself, and to know yourself. And then I ended with a quote from the movie Soul, where it says, sorry, my throat, but it says, "The joys of life are found in the simplest things, a slice of pizza, a cool breeze, or the laughter of a friend." So yeah, that's today's video on finding yourself. And if you can ever really find yourself, please feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for the love and support on my last video, and I hope to continue to improve in the future. Bye.